So my name is Chris. By background, I'm a chartered surveyor focused on valuations. But my work has always been around the use of data in valuations, but also in smart cities, in better understanding our built environment. I lead the property team at Artefact. Artefact is a management consultancy that brings together management consultants, really good data scientists, and we have a couple here, and property expertise, such as myself, but we have others in the team who do that. We do a series of things. The first one really is the foundational aspect, is understanding data strategy, governance, operating model, platform implementations, and so on. It's really building the foundations, making sure everyone knows and understands how to use data. Once this is done, we start looking at AI solutions. And we build lots and lots of bespoke AI and machine learning models for some of the UK's biggest clients. These are things like predicting market trends, predicting which site is likely to be more successful or less successful, targeting tenants, dynamic lease pricing. We're starting to do Gen AI stuff, which is quite exciting, around interrogating leases, historical leases. So there's lots of really exciting things that we're doing at the moment. Because we're management consultants, we also specialize in embedding the change. So it's one thing to have a really cool AI shiny tool. You need to make sure the processes, the systems, the governance, and everything else around it is in place, that you do the FTE changes that you need to do, that you have the operational efficiencies, and importantly, you unlock the benefits of the AI and the machine learning. Far too often, AI and machine learning falls flat in its face because very few people use it, no one else knows what it does, and is not fully integrated into your systems. We are global. We're in 19 countries. The UK is our third largest country. We are French-owned, so, there's a fun thing. We have 600, 700 people in France, so they're massive there. It means we get to have long lunches, which is good. But we're all over the world, and most of our brands are global brands. Here you can see in the middle some of our UK property brands, but we work globally across Unilever, LVMH, Samsung, etc., and we do a lot of global AI marketplace and work for them. So, enough about us. Let's talk about AI and machine learning, because AI is the cool kid on the block, and it's very rare I can say I'm a cool kid. So, 1990s really was the age of property still being done the traditional way. So this is face-to-face, it's very much experience-driven, it's very much relationship-driven, which it still is to a great degree. But now this has been embedded with increased levels of data, which is available to us. So companies like Zoopla, Rightmove, Realize, CoStar, and of course Landmark start coming on the scenes offering more and more data. This has, to a great degree, enabled new business models. We can now look at property in very different ways. So companies like WeWork, Get Living, Autodesk, etc., have started innovating in terms of business model and launching new and exciting things. 2020 is very much the age of AI. We are starting to really understand how we're going to use it. We're starting to figure out what the use cases are. Those of you who follow sort of what's happening with ChatGPT and all of the various OpenAI saga and so on, realize it flounders quite often, it hallucinates. We're trying to work out how we're going to use it, where is it useful for, how can we integrate it. This is the age of AI. New companies are coming out, which are really exciting around this. I spoke last week to Layout. They do AI-generated floor plans. Really easy way to do so. Very cool. You feed in the CAD drawing, click on generate, it gives you thousands of floor plans. You click on the bits you like, generates the rest again and again. Really easy, really cool. Zillow, don't know if you've seen, has recently launched their VR immersive house tours. It's going to change how estate agents do house tours in the future. You can walk around the house, completely immersive. Conveyor is doing conveyancing, Home Track, etc. Lots and lots of cool AI companies emerging. So, promises against realities. AI will take our jobs. True to some degree. It will take the jobs of those who don't use AI and who don't understand how it's being used. So, not quite yet, but many jobs will disappear. I was chatting with Alex this morning. Stock photography is done in a few months. Stock videos, it's done next year. That whole industry is gone. Within the property sector, agents will have to change how they do business. A lot of property developers will have to change how they do business. One of the companies that I had on the earlier slide was Vantage AI. They have drones that take photos of buildings, the 3D map buildings. Every month, they send a drone up, takes the same photos over and over again every month, and AI looks at the differences in the fabric of the building month by month, and then tells you, actually, you have issues here, and you have issues there, and you have damp appearing here, and you have crack appearing there. This is really exciting, but it also means you no longer need to spend millions on surveyors to start going around, putting hard hats on, going up scaffolding, going on the roof, and so on. You send drones up, AI-equipped drones. It will make all our decisions. Not quite. Having worked in AI in the property sector for the past 5 years, I'm yet to find a tool that really makes all our decisions. Most of them allow execs to make better informed decisions. Nearly all of the tools that we built are built for the execs to be better informed as to what's happening on the ground. This is where the real change is. We've built a tool recently for a care home provider to predict the occupancy of their care homes. The users of this are the board and the execs. Because up to now, they've always had to rely on land agents coming to the investment committee saying, here's a massive Excel, we think you should buy this plot of land. They have no choice but to nod and smile. Now execs can look at scenarios, they can look at different variables, and they can understand why these plots of land are good or why they're bad. It will generate significant savings and efficiencies. Yeah, it will. I'll give you a couple of demos. One of the tools has generated over £1 million in extra revenue per site. Another tool is generating massive efficiencies around releasing of pricing. So there's lots of things that can be done. So where is AI being used today across the property lifecycle? We all hear of AI, but actually very few companies are using it in anger, but it can be used. Defining the location, working out which site is going to be the most successful and why. What are the variables driving site success? We recently worked with a retirement housing provider, very large land bank. They wanted to work out which sites do we build on, which sites do we sell. We built a tool that looks at thousands of variables across each site and said, based on all of your historical performance, these sites are the most likely to be successful for you. Completely change how they do business. Site mix optimization. I'll give you a quick demo of this later on, so I'll pass this one now. AI-driven development appraisals. Everyone in the room, I'm assuming, is using Argus, Estate Master. Yes. Everyone in the room hates it. Yes. All of these are very analog. All of this doesn't plug into external data. It doesn't tell you where the challenges are, if your assumptions are correct. These can look at everything that's happened in the market and tell you if your assumptions are correct, if you are optimizing your build time, your cost curves, your revenue profiles, and so on. Intelligent project scheduling. Anyone here in construction, you'll be familiar with this. This is increasingly the course. Dynamic customer clusters for sales and marketing. No longer do you have to say, we're going to have a profile of Janet who works in tech, has 2 dogs, is not married, earns £75,000 a year, etc. Dynamic clusters will allow you to really understand the makeup of your customers and their ability to buy or to pay, not based on single profiles, which are done by marketeers, but based on millions and millions of behavioral data points. This is game-changing. Predictive repairs and maintenance, particularly for social housing, is the biggest source of complaint, is the biggest issue, yet data can fairly easily solve this. We are building tools in predictive repairs and maintenance where you look at the history of all of the bills across your asset register of how much you've paid for repairs across all of your assets. We then predict which assets are likely to fail. We do the scheduling of all of your repairs, planned and unplanned. We have partners in the room at the back, Red Olive, who do enormous amounts of data analytics on the back of predicting repairs and maintenance. This, of course, then takes care of a lot of your complaints. About 60–70% of your complaints in social housing is around repairs and maintenance. It's a massive saving. Dynamic lease pricing. You pay dynamic lease pricing for your hotel rooms, for your flights, for your trains, for everything else. Increasingly, this is being used in your leasing. And I'll show you an example of this in a second. Of course, there's lots and lots of specialist use cases. And I'm not going to go through all of them. but some of the ones we have done around AI, where is it? I had it somewhere. Gen AI lease interrogation. You're all familiar with ChatGPT? ChatGPT has an enterprise module. You can install it in a sandbox environment. You can feed it all of your historical leases, however many thousands of leases you have. You then get a chatbot, and you type in, how many doctors are leasing from me? How many dentists are leasing from me? Do I have more doctors than dentists? Do the dentists take up more square footage? Do they pay more per square footage? Etc., etc. You can interrogate 30 years of leases in a heartbeat, in seconds, which allows you to fire your interns. Industrial. We are working with a company at the moment on cold storage, where to build cold storage, how are supermarkets selling all the various vegetables, meats, etc., which are required for cold storage. So enormous amount of potential data here linked to transport and everything as infrastructure to work this out. So, 2 demos. First one, dynamic lease pricing. Build-to-rent operator, a fairly large build-to-rent operator in the UK, has a very manual process to work out how much lease renewals, what the lease terms are for the lease renewals. So they have 7 buildings in a particular area of London, and they're saying, right, whenever lease renewal comes up, we increase it by 5% over the past year, because that's what we've decided at investment committee meeting. Everyone gets a 5% uplift in their leases. Some people leave, some people stay. This is a massively manual process. This is not data-driven. They index it to CPI or to other things. They rarely achieve their targets because a lot of people move on to other leases. They're not tracking what the market is doing. We are building for them a reinforcement learning engine, which essentially builds dynamic clusters on all of the tenants. It understands what the tenants do and how they behave. So Janet from accounting, who's on the 3rd floor, we know that she's been here for 5 years. We know that she pays her rent on time. We know how often she uses the building, how often she comes in and out, etc., etc. So we can assign that behavior to lots of other similar tenants in the building. The tool also learns from market liquidity. We look at what's happening in the markets outside of our buildings. We see if it's a strong market, if it's a weak market. We know what the requirements are for the particular building. It has to generate £15 million a year in revenue. It cannot have more than 20% of void. Right, you've set your requirements. You've also set up the makeup of the building. So you have 30 floors of residential. So it knows that the price differential between the ground floor and the top floor is, let's say, 20%. It knows that the south-facing units are slightly more prominent than the north-facing units. So all of these parameters you can define. Then the reinforcement learning engine will look at the market, will look at the conditions in the building, and say, I'm quite confident that Janet is going to pay a 10% increase on her rent. The model automatically provides a 10% increase on lease terms, 5 months before expiration. Janet says, no, thank you, I'll go somewhere else. Right, don't go. I'll discount it to 3%, so I'll give you a 7% increase on lease terms. The model, Janet then says, okay, good. The model has now learned that this is how Janet behaved and will apply the same principles across to her cluster. And it will predict the likelihood of each person renewing at different price points. So everyone in the building will end up having a very slightly different price. Of course, it's slightly scary to think you have a model that makes pricing decisions for you, but you can say you cannot discount more than X, or you cannot increase by more than Y. So you can put parameters in place, but the reinforcement learning engine will test every parameter in between. So it will test everything to see where the sweet spots are, knowing it has to optimize the building for a particular level of rent. Second demo, site mix optimization. We have worked with a nationwide house builder. They build very similar house types across the UK, across all of their sites. They have about 500 sites across the UK, going back over 20 years. They came to us and they said, we think we are leaving money on the table. We have to replan our sites on 2 or 3 times per site, because we're working out that people don't want to buy the 5-bedroom houses, they're more interested in 2-bedroom houses, etc. Looking at how long it takes us to have looking at land banks and land opportunities takes us about 6 weeks to think of a development appraisal and think about what is the residual value for that particular site. We want a tool that can do that for us in seconds, if not minutes. So we've built a series of neural networks. The first one goes back 30 years and builds correlations between every house transaction for that particular developer. So it's trained on their data and all of the data at the time. So all of the macroeconomic data and all of the hyperlocal contextual data. It builds correlations across the UK for each of their houses and each of their sites. It then moves into a second neural network, which says, I now know what the correlations are. Build me millions and millions of potential predictions for the site. So what is the ideal site mix for that particular site? How many 2 beds do I have? How many 3 beds do I have? Of what type? How much do I price them for? And so on. And of course, in the middle, we have an automated valuation model that predicts in 2 to 5 years what is the likelihood of you selling your particular house type at that particular price for that particular postcode. So incredibly powerful. I showed it to Alex this morning, but it allows a house builder to come up with a site mix in about 10 minutes. It's not the final site mix because it doesn't take into account topography and so on, but it gets you about 80% of the way there. It gets you to a really good idea of what the residual value should be, of what type of housing you should build, and if you should build for the site at all. You then send it to your designers and your land planners and so on, and you can then get to your final site mix. We've back-tested this model. This model adds about £1 million in profit on every site it has been deployed so far. So incredibly powerful. Implementing AI is not easy. We have been doing it for about 5 years. We have learned a lot along the way. I speak to a lot of execs that say, the field is evolving so fast, we'll just wait a few months to see what's going to come next. They're saying they don't have enough data or their data is not good enough. This used to be a problem, it's no longer a problem. We can now work incredibly well with unstructured data. We also, in most cases, don't need client data because of partners like Landmark. We have enormous amounts and enormous wealth of data that we can work on. And a lot of the reinforcement learning engines build their own data as they train and as they go along. So you don't actually need that much data to get started with. Property requires human judgment. True, absolutely. We build decision support tools. You don't need a data science team, etc., etc. Typically, when we do projects, we break them down into different phases to minimize the risk. So typically, we have a sort of free half-a-day workshop ideation session. What's the art of the possible? We then have an explore to really scope out what can be done. Then we have a proof of concept, sample data size. It's not going out to market. It's not really making market decisions, but we run it alongside the market for a period of time to see how does it actually perform. Then if everything goes well, we then build the model, and then we go through user testing, implementation, and so on. This allows you to massively de-risk your projects and to also reduce the costs. Alongside all of this, we do a lot of change management to the people, to the organization, to make sure it works and is embedded. So the things you have to consider from a business perspective, leadership buy-in, resources, etc., need to be available. People need to be brought in. There's lots of ways of doing the change management, and we've worked with a lot of people in the sector who are reluctant to change. Give them an iPad, show them how the work will be much easier, how they have access to more information, things start to change. Tech and financial, I'll let you go through them, and I'm happy to send the slides if you'd like to see them at some point. But final words, AI is not a single thing. AI is being branded about. Most of what we do is machine learning. A lot of what we do is data analytics. We don't actually use enormous amounts of AI or Gen AI and those sorts of things. We're still struggling to find really good use cases for Gen AI. Most of it is really good machine learning and tried and tested techniques that have been in the market for the past 10 years. They're just being improved, and we now actually have access to a lot of data. Small data sets, as long as they're good and clean quality and trustworthy, are incredibly powerful. We'd much rather have smaller data sets than huge, massive data sets. Always focus on the business outcome. Work out exactly what KPI you're trying to change and what is the measure you're trying to change it for. This is the biggest mistake that we find in a lot of companies is, I want a tool that will do this. Okay, sure, but what does it actually do for your business? What is the change it will drive? Is it FTE reduction? Is it increase in revenue? Is it operational efficiencies? What are the KPIs you're changing? And really being very clear about the success criteria. When we're doing a POC, we always write down in our user stories, we need revenue to be driven by at least 10% for this to be a success and implemented. We need a reduction of 20% of FTE or improvement in decision-making time from 6 weeks to 6 days, etc. We need to be really, really clear as to what they are. Simple and iterative is best. The best models we have built so far, the most successful ones, have started with basic, simple modules. We do one thing, we see how it lands, we drive the change, we then build more on top of it, then we build more, and then we build more. Building everything that's shiny in the first go is dangerous and doesn't always work. And some key consideration for you to look at, things that work best are things that are volume-driven, they're routine, they drive every day, they're integrating your workflow and so on. If you're trying to answer a single exam question and need to build an AI tool, it will often not work. If you only have one person who will use it, it will often not work. Think of the processes which are routine, which are operational for you. This is where AI can help a lot. And that's it. Slightly over my time, but thank you very much.